Please, don't hurt me. I can't stand, she cried, dragging the small child behind her as a shape with crimson eyes filled the alley. The rain froze midair, the world went silent, and he knelt before her, his power suffocating. He wouldn't hurt her, he said, but his voice was a silken trap as he gave his one condition: not until you agree to become mine. The rain came down like razors, sharp, freezing, merciless. It turned the narrow alley into a river of shadows, the wet brick walls bleeding darkness into pools that swallowed the distant street lamps' glow. In that forgotten corner of the city, the world was nothing but cold and fear. Amelia Hart dragged herself backward, her breath tearing from her lungs. One hand clawed at the slick pavement. The other gripped the small wrist of the child beside her. The boy. His thin t-shirt clung to his shaking frame, soaked through, his eyes wide and unblinking. Please, Amelia gasped, the word breaking apart in her throat. Don't hurt me. I can't stand. Her leg, wrapped in a filthy white cast, scraped against the cobblestones as she tried to push herself upright. The pain screamed through her thigh. She collapsed against the cold wall, her vision swimming, her pulse a drum in her ears. Behind them, somewhere in the dark, footsteps echoed. Heavy, patient, inevitable. The child's hand slipped from hers, and his small shoe splashed into a puddle. The water rippled outward, distorting the reflection of the distant light. Rain poured down Amelia's face, washing away the dirt, the blood, the tears she couldn't hold back. Then, silence. The rain didn't stop, but the sound of it vanished. The wind cut out mid-howl. Even her ragged breathing seemed muted, as if the world had pressed pause. A shape filled the mouth of the alley. Tall, still, impossibly graceful. Lightning split the sky, and for one blinding heartbeat, the alley was flooded with white light. He stood at its center. Long dark coat rippling in a wind that didn't exist. Pale skin, sharp features, hair like spilled moonlight. And his eyes. Crimson. Not just red. Ancient red. The kind of red that didn't reflect light. It devoured it. Amelia's breath stopped. Her heart stumbled. She pulled the boy close, wrapping her trembling arms around his small body. Stay behind me, she whispered, her voice shaking. Don't look. But the boy's small voice broke through her terror. He's not a monster, he said softly. He's tired. The figure stepped forward, boots soundless on the wet stone. With every step, the rain began to slow. Not stop, asterisk slow, asterisk. Each droplet hung suspended in the air, frozen mid-fall, glittering like broken glass. The alley shimmered, the air itself bending around him. Amelia's mind fractured. Asterisk, this isn't real. This can't be real, asterisk. He stopped 3 feet away. And knelt. The motion was deliberate, controlled, a king lowering himself before a beggar. The storm's light caught his face, pale, aristocratic, unnaturally beautiful. His presence was suffocating. Yet something in his stillness felt like sanctuary. Amelia flinched when his hand moved toward her, muscle memory from too many nights dodging blows. But his touch never came. Instead, his pale fingers hovered near her broken leg, the air around them humming softly, vibrating with invisible warmth. The pain dulled. The sharp, grinding ache softened to a distant throb. His voice came low, measured, the kind of voice that could command armies or end wars. No, he said, each word deliberate. I will not hurt you. Amelia blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. Then what do you want? The stranger's crimson eyes met hers. Something flickered there. Weariness. Recognition. An ache 8 centuries deep. I want, he said, his accent curling around the words, French, old, refined, for you to agree to this. The words landed like thunder. Not loud, but heavy. Agree to what? She whispered. His gaze didn't waver. To live. To be protected. To become my ward. Ward. The word tasted foreign on her tongue, like something out of a history book or a fever dream. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. Who are you?" "Alaric Devereux." He said it simply, as if the name should mean something. As if it carried weight across centuries. "And you, Amelia Hart, are the key to preventing the end of everything." Her name in his mouth sent a shiver down her spine. How did he know her name? The boy peeked out from behind Amelia's shoulder. "Mamma Mia," he whispered. "He's glowing." And he was. Faint threads of crimson light pulsed beneath the skin of his hands, tracing the veins like molten rivers. The light matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. Asterisk thump, glow, thump, glow asterisk, as if her life and his power were suddenly, impossibly linked. The alley breathed around them. The suspended rain shimmered like stars. "What do you mean, Key?" Amelia's voice cracked. "I'm nobody. I'm just trying to survive." "Your bloodline," Alaric said, his tone softening slightly, "is lunar pure. The last of its kind. Without you, the blight will consume this world and the next. Millions will die, both mortal and immortal. The blight." She'd heard whispers of it in the days before she'd started running. Rumors in the underground networks. A sickness spreading through the supernatural world. But she'd thought it was just another urban legend, another story to keep people afraid. "I don't have any special blood," she said, shaking her head. "You're wrong. You have the wrong person." "I am never wrong." His voice was absolute. Final. "And I have been searching for you for decades." Decades. The word hung in the air like smoke. "The covenant I offer is simple," he continued, his crimson eyes never leaving hers. "You will live under my protection. In my home. Under my watch. You will be safe, fed, cared for. The child as well. No harm will come to either of you. And in exchange?" Her throat felt tight. "Your freedom." The honesty of it struck her harder than any lie could have. "You want me to be your prisoner," she said flatly. "I want you to be alive." His jaw tightened. "There are those in my world who would use your blood to accelerate the blight, not stop it. They believe culling the mortal world will purify the immortal one. If they find you before I secure you, they will drain you, kill you, and doom everyone you've ever known." Amelia's hands trembled. The boy pressed closer to her, his small fingers clutching the fabric of her soaked jacket. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "You're one of them." "Because," Alaric said, and for the first time, something human flickered across his face, "I have spent 800 years watching the people I swore to protect destroy themselves. I am tired, Amelia Hart. Tired of war. Tired of death. Tired of failing." His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Let me not fail you. 800 years." The weight of it pressed against her chest. She looked down at the boy, his wide eyes reflecting the strange crimson glow. He wasn't hers, not by blood, but she'd found him 3 weeks ago, hiding in a burned-out squat, and she couldn't leave him. Wouldn't leave him. If she refused, they'd both die in this alley. Or worse. If she agreed. "The boy," she said, her voice steadier now. "He stays with me. No cages. No locks on his door. He gets to be a child." Alaric's expression shifted, surprise, perhaps, or respect. "Agreed. And when this is over," she continued, her heart pounding, "when you've stopped this blight or whatever, you let me go. You let us go." A pause. Long and weighted. "When it is over," he said carefully, "I will release you from the covenant. You have my word." It wasn't a promise of freedom. It was a promise of eventual freedom. A trap with a distant, uncertain exit. But it was more than she had now. "Then I agree," she whispered. The moment the words left her mouth, the world moved. The suspended rain rushed downward all at once, drenching them in a torrent. The wind roared back to life. The alley snapped into motion, time catching up with itself in a dizzying lurch. Alaric rose in one fluid motion and reached forward, lifting her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing at all. His arms were solid, cold, but strangely gentle. "You have suffered long enough," he murmured, his voice a vow wrapped in silk and steel. "No one will touch you again." The air grew warmer. The storm's roar faded to a distant hum. The world itself seemed to bend to his will. Amelia's eyelids fluttered, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. She felt the boy being lifted as well, cradled against Alaric's other side. His small shoe, the one that had fallen, now floated in midair before gently settling back onto his foot. Perfectly dry. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was the crimson eyes of the monster she had feared, now filled with something that looked like devotion. The rain began to move again, falling softly, but none of it touched her. Morning always came too quietly in Le Palais de Nuit. No alarm, no birdsong, just the soft whisper of ancient stone settling and the distant creak of shutters closing against the dawn. Amelia woke slowly, her body sinking into sheets that cost more than her entire flat back in London. The bed was enormous, draped in heavy midnight blue velvet that pooled on the marble floor. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood and something else, something timeless, like the air inside a cathedral. Beautiful. Suffocating. She moved carefully, testing her leg. The filthy cast was gone. In its place, a precise white bandage wrapped from ankle to mid-thigh, the fabric soft and clean. The pain had dulled to a distant ache, manageable, no longer the screaming agony of the alley. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor, and she shivered. The boy, she still didn't know his name, slept curled in an oversized chair by the window, a thick blanket of deep green wool draped over him. Someone had changed his clothes. He wore clean pajamas now, soft cotton, far too expensive for a child pulled from the streets. A silver music box sat on the bedside table, lid open, mechanism silent. It had played once, when she first woke in the night, disoriented and terrified. A haunting, unfinished melody that made her chest ache. She'd reached for it, but it had stopped mid-note, as if it too was tired. Amelia limped to the tall window and pulled back the heavy velvet curtain. Beyond the glass, the world had changed. No city lights. No distant hum of traffic. No neon bleeding into rain-soaked streets. Just mist. The chateau stretched endlessly before her, stone towers rising into low clouds, mist-covered gardens enclosed by high walls, pathways that vanished into fog. Everything was gray and silver and ancient, like a painting from another century. It was breathtaking. It was a prison. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and exhaled, her breath fogging the window. Where am I? The door behind her was locked. She'd tried it 3 times in the night, each time met with the soft, immovable resistance of iron and old magic. The boy stirred in the chair, mumbling something in his sleep. She turned and limped over to him, kneeling beside the chair despite the protest in her leg. She brushed a strand of dark hair from his forehead. He looked peaceful. Safe. For the first time in weeks, maybe longer, he looked like a child, not a survivor. "Just one more sunrise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's all we need." It was what she told herself every morning. A promise made to keep standing. But this time, she wasn't sure if she was surviving. Or simply becoming part of the cage. A soft knock sounded at the door. Amelia's head snapped up, her pulse spiking. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly, soundlessly. A woman stood in the doorway. Tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a long black dress that whispered against the floor, and her eyes, pale gray, cold, swept over Amelia with the efficiency of a physician assessing a patient. "Miss Hart," the woman said, her accent clipped, French, but softened by centuries. "I am Marguerite. I have been assigned to attend to you and the child during your residence." Residence. Not captivity. Not imprisonment. Residence. Amelia stood slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. "Where am I?" "Le Palais de Nuit," Marguerite replied. "The seat of His Majesty, Alaric Devereux, sovereign of the court of endless night." His Majesty. Sovereign. The titles sounded absurd, like something out of a Gothic novel. But the woman's face was utterly serious. "I want to leave," Amelia said. "That is not permitted." "I didn't ask if it was permitted. I said I want to leave." Marguerite's expression didn't shift. "You agreed to the covenant, Miss Hart. His Majesty is bound to protect you. You are bound to remain." "For how long?" "Until the blight is ended." Marguerite stepped into the room, her movements precise. "Breakfast will be served in your quarters this morning. This afternoon, you will be presented to the court. His Majesty requests your presence at 4 o'clock. And if I refuse, then you will be carried." Marguerite's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. Simply stating reality. "His Majesty does not make idle requests." Amelia's joy tightened. The child will remain here under guard with tutors and attendants. He will be safe, fed, and educated. Per the terms you negotiated. Negotiated? As if she'd had any real choice. Marguerite moved to the wardrobe and opened it, revealing rows of dresses, gowns, clothes Amelia had never owned and never wanted. "You will dress appropriately for court. I will return in 2 hours to assist you." "I can dress myself." "Not in these, you cannot." Marguerite's lips twitched, the barest hint of amusement. "Court fashion has not changed in 3 centuries, Miss Hart. You will need assistance." And with that, she turned and left, the door closing softly behind her. The lock clicked. Amelia stood frozen in the center of the opulent room, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The boy stirred again, blinking awake. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and looked around the unfamiliar room with confusion. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice small. Amelia crossed to him and knelt, taking his hands in hers. "Somewhere safe," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Somewhere no one can hurt you." "The glowing man brought us here?" "Yes." "Is he a king?" Amelia hesitated. "Yes, I think he is." The boy considered this, his expression thoughtful. Then he looked up at her, his dark eyes too old for his age. "Are we his prisoners?" Amelia's throat tightened. She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him everything would be fine, that they'd leave soon, that this was temporary. But she'd never lied to him before. "I don't know," she whispered. The boy nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. He reached for her hand and squeezed it. "It's okay, Mamma Mia," he said softly. "As long as we're together." Amelia pulled him into her arms and held him tight, her eyes burning. Outside, the mist rolled across the endless grounds of Le Palais de Nut. Inside, the music box on the table began to play again. The same haunting, unfinished melody. A lullaby that never ended. Only paused. Waiting. The Hall of Eternal Mirrors was not designed for mortals. Amelia understood this the moment Marguerite led her through the towering doors. The chambers stretched impossibly long, the ceiling lost somewhere in shadow and golden light. Mirrors lined both walls, floor to vaulted ceiling, each one framed in tarnished silver that had witnessed centuries. Chandeliers dripped with crystals that caught and refracted the candlelight into 1,000 dancing stars. And between the mirrors, they stood. The court. Dozens of them. Perhaps more. All perfectly still, arranged in a crescent formation that faced a raised dais at the far end of the hall. They wore silks and velvets in deep jewel tones, crimson, emerald, midnight blue, fashions from eras long dead. High collars, elaborate embroidery, lace that looked delicate enough to dissolve at a touch. Their skin was uniformly pale, luminous, as if lit from within by cold fire. Not one of them blinked. Not one of them breathed. Amelia's legs trembled beneath the heavy gown Marguerite had laced her into. The dress was beautiful, ivory silk with gold threading, the bodice structured like armor, the skirts so heavy she could barely walk. Her casted leg had been fitted with a discreet brace beneath the fabric, but each step still sent a dull ache through her thigh. Marguerite's hand rested firmly on her elbow, guiding her forward. "Eyes ahead, Miss Hart," she murmured. Do not meet their gaze unless spoken to directly. Why not? Amelia whispered. Because they are predators. And your prey. The words settled like ice in her stomach. As they walked the length of the hall, Amelia felt every eye tracking her. The weight of their attention was physical, oppressive, like being examined under glass. The mirrors reflected her image 1,000 times over, a single mortal woman, pale and limping, drowning in silk and gold. Fragile. Breakable. Delicious. At the end of the hall, Alaric sat upon a throne of black iron and bone. He wore a tailored coat of charcoal gray, the cut severe and modern compared to the archaic finery around him. His pale hair was pulled back, his crimson eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He did not smile, but something in his expression softened when he saw her. Marguerite stopped 10 paces from the dais and curtsied deeply. Amelia, unsure, tried to mimic the gesture and nearly lost her balance. Marguerite's hand shot out, steadying her. Your Majesty, Marguerite said clearly. I present Miss Amelia Hart as summoned. Alaric rose in one fluid motion. The room seemed to contract around him, all attention snapping to their king. Leave us, Marguerite, he said. The older woman hesitated, then curtsied again and retreated, her footsteps echoing until the great doors closed behind her with a resonant boom. Amelia stood alone before the court. Come forward, Miss Hart, Alaric said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. She limped forward, each step an agony of effort and pride. She would not be carried. Not in front of them. When she reached the base of the dais, Alaric descended to meet her, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Members of the Court of Endless Night, he said, turning to address the assembly, I present to you Amelia Hart. She is under my protection. She is bound by covenant. Her safety is paramount. Any who threaten her threaten me. Silence. Then, from the left side of the crescent, a woman stepped forward. She was breathtaking. Porcelain skin, raven-black hair piled in elaborate curls, a gown of deep burgundy that clung to her like liquid. Her lips were painted the color of fresh blood, and her eyes, pale amber, almost gold, fixed on Amelia with open contempt. Your Majesty risks his throne, the woman said, her voice honeyed and sharp, for a mortal trinket? A murmur rippled through the court. Agreement. Amusement. Hunger. Alaric's expression didn't shift, but the air grew colder. Baroness Serafina, he said quietly, you will address me with the respect due your sovereign, or you will be removed. Serafina's smile widened, showing the barest hint of fong. Of course, your Majesty. Forgive my curiosity. But surely the court deserves an explanation. We are asked to protect this fragile creature, to elevate her above our own kind, and yet we are given no reason. The reason, Alaric said, his tone like iron wrapped in silk, is that she is essential to our survival. Essential. Serafina laughed, the sound musical and cruel. She is human. She will wither and die before the decade is out. How can something so temporary be essential? Alaric stepped between Amelia and Serafina, a deliberate barrier. Because, he said, without her, the blight will consume us all. The murmurs stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. A figure stepped forward from the right, a tall man with silver hair and spectacles, dressed in black robes that looked scholarly, almost priestly. He bowed to Alaric. Your Majesty, he said, his accent thickly French, if I may explain to the court? Alaric nodded. The man turned to face the assembly, his hands folded before him. I am Dr. Émile Renaud, he said. For 2 centuries, I have studied the blight. It is not a disease in the mortal sense. It is a corruption, a decay of life force itself. It began in the mortal world, slowly draining vitality from the living, plants wither, animals weaken, humans fall ill without cause. But it does not stop there. He paused, letting the weight settle. The blight spreads, he continued. It crosses the veil between worlds. It has already begun to infect our kind. You have seen it. The lethargy. The weakening of our gifts. The strange, oily residue left when one of us is destroyed. Amelia's skin prickled. She remembered the way Alaric had described it. Asterisk, a creeping death. Asterisk. The blight, Renaud said, will extinguish the mortal world within a generation. And then it will turn on us. Immortality means nothing if there is no life force left to sustain us. We will starve. Slowly. Eternally. The court was utterly still. There is, Renaud said carefully, a counterspell. An ancient working inscribed in texts older than this court. But it requires a catalyst. A bloodline of perfect purity, untainted by the blight's corruption. He turned to Amelia. Miss Hart, he said, carries the lunar pure bloodline. It is exceedingly rare. Perhaps extinct, save for her. Her blood is the final component needed to complete the spell and halt the blight's spread. Amelia felt every eye in the room fix on her again. Not with contempt this time. With hunger. So you see, Alaric said, his voice cutting through the tension, she is not a trinket. She is the key to our survival. And I will protect her with every resource at my disposal. Seraphina's expression had gone cold and calculating. And when the spell is complete, she asked. When her blood has been utilized? She will be released from the covenant, Alaric said. Alive. Whole. Free. How generous, Seraphina murmured. Alaric's eyes flashed crimson. This audience is concluded. You are dismissed. The court bowed as one and began to file out through side doors, their movements silent and synchronized. Seraphina lingered, her gaze locked on Amelia for a long, venomous moment before she turned and swept from the hall, her gown trailing like spilled wine. When the last of them had gone, Amelia's legs finally gave out. Alaric caught her before she hit the floor, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. You did well, he said quietly. I'm not a key, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'm a person. I know. He carried her to the throne and set her down gently on the seat. But to them, you are a resource. And resources are either protected or exploited. Which am I to you? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Both, he said finally. And I am sorry for it. Amelia's hands clenched in the heavy silk of her gown. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest, but beneath it, something else was rising. Anger. The boy, she said. I want him to have full freedom within the palais. No locks on his door. Tutors, nannies, whatever he needs. I want him to be safe, but I want him to be a child. Alaric tilted his head. That was already agreed upon. I want it in writing. A formal addendum to the covenant. His lips twitched. Almost a smile. You are negotiating with me, Miss Hart? You said I'm essential, she said, meeting his gaze. That makes me valuable. And valuable things have bargaining power. For a moment, he simply looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, perhaps. Or respect. Very well, he said. I will have Renaud draft the amendment tonight. Anything else? I want to see him. Every day. No exceptions. Granted. And I want to know the truth. All of it. What this spell requires. What it will cost me. Alaric's expression grew somber. It will require a single vial of your blood, drawn under specific lunar conditions. The process is painless. You will not be harmed. And after, the blight will be halted. The world will be saved. And you will be free to leave. Do you promise? I swear it on my throne and my name. Amelia exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Then I'll do it, she said. But not because you demand it. Because it's the right thing to do. Alaric knelt before her, his crimson eyes level with hers. You are braver than most immortals I have known, he said quietly. And I will not let you come to harm. She wanted to believe him. Part of her, frighteningly, did. He rose and offered her his hand. She took it, letting him help her to her feet. Come, he said. I will escort you back to your chambers. As they walked through the empty hall, Amelia glanced at the mirrors lining the walls. In every reflection, she saw herself, small, mortal, fragile. But she also saw Alaric beside her. And for the first time, he looked less like a monster, and more like a man carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear alone. Far below the Hall of Eternal Mirrors, in a chamber lit only by black candles, Baroness Seraphina stood before a gathering of 7 cloaked figures. "The mortal girl is the key," she said, her voice low and fervent. "But Alaric is a fool. He would use her blood to stop the blight." One of the figures leaned forward. "And you propose?" Seraphina's amber eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "We let the blight run its course," she said. "We purge the mortal world. And then we rise, untainted, eternal, supreme. The girl's blood will not save them. It will hasten their end." The figure nodded slowly. "What do you need from us?" Seraphina smiled. "Patience," she said. "And when the time comes, her death." The days at Le Palais de Newt blurred into a rhythm that was both comfortable and suffocating. Amelia woke each morning to sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, breakfast already waiting on a silver tray, fresh bread, perfectly ripe fruit, tea that tasted of bergamot, and something faintly floral she couldn't name. Marguerite arrived precisely at 9 to help her dress, the older woman's hands efficient and impersonal as she laced Amelia into gowns that cost more than most people earned in a year. By 10, the tutors came. First, Monsieur Laurent, who taught her the intricate etiquette of the court, how to curtsy without toppling, which fork to use, how to address a baroness versus a viscount. His patience was infinite, his corrections gentle but firm. Then Madame Colette, who instructed her in French. Amelia already spoke some, enough to get by, but Colette insisted on perfection. "The court speaks the French of Louis XIV, she explained. "Modern French is inadequate." In the afternoons, Dr. Renaud examined her. He took her pulse, drew small vials of blood for testing, asked her endless questions about her family history. He was clinical, methodical, but not unkind. He explained everything he did, which she appreciated, even when she didn't fully understand. Her leg healed faster than it should have. Renaud said it was the air of the Palais, saturated with old magic. Within a week, the brace came off. Within 2, she walked without pain. It was a luxurious prison. And she was a beautifully dressed captive. But the boy, he flourished. She saw him every afternoon in the gardens, as Alaric had promised. He ran through the hedge mazes with a wooden sword, chased by a kind-faced woman named Lisette who laughed at his antics and never tired of his games. He had tutors too, learning to read and write, learning numbers and history and things he'd never had the chance to learn on the streets. He smiled now. Really smiled. Amelia sat on a stone bench one afternoon, watching him play, and felt her chest tighten with something bittersweet. He was safe. Federal happy. Everything she'd wanted for him. But at what cost? "He is thriving," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Alaric standing in the shadow of an archway, hands clasped behind his back. He looked different in the daylight, still pale, still otherworldly, but somehow less menacing. The crimson of his eyes was muted, almost amber in the sun. "He is," Amelia said carefully. "Thank you for keeping your word." "I do not break my vows, Miss Hart." "Amelia," she said. "If I'm going to be here for the foreseeable future, you might as well call me by my name." He inclined his head slightly. "Amelia, then." He moved to sit on the far end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, they simply watched the boy play. "You look tired," Amelia said quietly. Alaric glanced at her, surprised. "I am immortal. We do not tire. You look it anyway." A pause. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, fleeting thing. "Perhaps I am weary then. There is a difference. 800 years is a long time to carry the weight of the world." "It is." He leaned back slightly, his gaze distant. "Some days, I wonder what it would be like to simply stop." To let someone else bear the burden. Why don't you? Because there is no one else. His voice was quiet, resigned. The court is fractured. Serafina and her faction believe in supremacy through purity. Others cling to the old ways, afraid of change. And a few, a precious few, still believe we can coexist with your world. He looked at her. I am the only thing holding them together. If I fall, so does everything. Amelia studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes that shouldn't exist on an immortal face. That's a lonely way to live, she said. It is the only way I know. The boys' laughter echoed across the garden, bright and unburdened. Alaric stood. I have matters to attend to, but I am glad to see you both well. He left before she could respond, his long coat billowing behind him like a shadow. The formal dinners were worse than the tutors. 3 times a week, Amelia was required to dine in the great hall with select members of the court. She sat at Alaric's right hand, silent unless directly addressed, while conversations in rapid, archaic French swirled around her like smoke. Serafina was always there. Tonight, she wore emerald green, her dark hair adorned with tiny diamond pins that caught the candlelight. She smiled often, but her eyes remained cold. Tell me, Miss Hart, Serafina said, her voice carrying down the table, how does the boy fare? Such a charming child. So vulnerable. Amelia's fingers tightened on her fork. He's well, thank you. I do hope he remains so, Serafina continued, dabbing her lips with a napkin. Children can be so fragile. One never knows when tragedy might strike. The table went quiet. Alaric's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Baroness, do you have something you wish to say plainly? Serafina's smile widened. Not at all, Your Majesty. Merely expressing concern for our guest's dependent. Your concern, Alaric said coldly, is noted and unnecessary. Amelia set down her fork carefully. She met Serafina's gaze across the table. Tragedy, she said, her tone light, almost conversational, does have a way of finding those who go looking for it. Wouldn't you agree, Baroness? Serafina's eyes flashed. How very quaint, she murmured. Alaric's lips twitched. Almost a smile. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. When dessert arrived, a delicate pastry filled with cream and berries, Amelia lifted her fork. Alaric's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Do not eat that, he said quietly. Amelia froze. What? He released her wrist and stood, his movements deliberate. He picked up her plate and inhaled deeply, his expression darkening. Hemlock, he said. Diluted, but present. A ripple of shock moved through the table. Alaric turned to the servant who had delivered the dessert, a young man with pale skin and nervous eyes. Who prepared this plate? Alaric asked, his voice dangerously calm. I don't know, Your Majesty, the servant stammered. It came from the kitchens. Bring me the cook. Now. The servant fled. Serafina rose gracefully. Surely, Your Majesty, this is an unfortunate accident. Sit down. She sat. Within minutes, the servant returned with a trembling woman in a cook's apron. She took one look at Alaric and fell to her knees. Your Majesty, I swear I didn't. Who paid you? Alaric asked. No one. Who? Paid? You. The cook's face crumpled. The Baroness's aide. He said it was just to make the mortal ill, not to kill her, just to. Alaric raised one hand. The cook's words cut off with a choked gasp. She clutched her throat, eyes wide, as invisible pressure closed around her windpipe. Alaric, Amelia whispered, standing. Don't. He didn't look at her. You attempted to poison a guest under my protection. Under covenant. The cook's face turned purple. The penalty, Alaric said, is death. He clenched his fist. The cook's body convulsed once, then crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Silence. Alaric turned to Amelia, his expression unreadable. Come. He took her arm and led her from the hall, leaving the stunned court behind. They walked in silence through empty corridors until they reached the courtyard. The night air was cool, the stars hidden behind clouds. Alaric released her arm and stepped away, running a hand through his hair. "I did not mean for you to witness that," he said quietly. Amelia's hands trembled. "You killed her." "I executed a traitor." She was afraid. Someone manipulated her. And her fear does not absolve her crime. He turned to face her, his crimson eyes blazing. "You are the key to the world's survival, Amelia. Your life is no longer your own. I will not have my property damaged." The word hit her like a slap. "Property," she repeated, her voice hollow. Alaric's expression shifted, something like regret flickering across his face. "I did not mean." "Yes, you did." She took a step back. "That's all I am to you. A resource. A key. Property to be protected. Amelia. Good night, Your Majesty." She turned and walked away, her spine straight, her head high, even as her heart cracked beneath the weight of gilded bars she couldn't see but felt everywhere. Behind her, Alaric stood alone in the courtyard, watching her go. And for the first time in 800 years, he felt the sharp, unfamiliar sting of shame. The library at Le Palais de Newt was a cathedral of knowledge. 3 stories tall, with spiral staircases connecting each level, shelves stretching toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations that slowly moved across painted heavens. The books themselves were ancient, leather bindings cracked with age, pages yellowed and brittle, text in languages Amelia couldn't begin to identify. But some were in English. Some were in French she could struggle through. And Dr. Renaud had given her a list. "If you wish to understand the Blight," he'd said, sliding a piece of paper across his desk, "you must understand its history. These texts will help." So Amelia read. She sat curled in a window seat on the second level, wrapped in a wool shawl against the perpetual chill, and learned about the end of the world. The Blight was cyclical. It appeared roughly every 300 years, spreading like rot through the mortal world before somehow burning itself out. But each time, it grew stronger, lasted longer, killed more. The last occurrence had been in 1702. Amelia's fingers traced the faded script of a journal entry written in cramped, desperate handwriting. Asterisk, "The sickness spreads without mercy. Crops fail. Livestock perish. Children weaken and fade like candle flames in wind. The court blames Marguerite, the king's mortal consort. They say her presence has drawn the corruption. They demand her death. The king refuses. He loves her. God help us all, he loves her." Asterisk. The entry ended there. Amelia turned the page. Asterisk, "Marguerite is dead. Executed by the king's own hand to appease the court." The Blight faded within a fortnight. Whether her death caused the reprieve or merely coincided with it, none can say. The king has not spoken in 3 weeks. I fear we have broken something in him that will never mend. Asterisk. Amelia closed the book slowly, her chest tight. Alaric had killed the woman he loved. To save the world. Or because his court demanded it. She didn't know which was worse. "You are reading the Plague Chronicles." She startled, nearly dropping the book. Alaric stood at the top of the spiral staircase, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable. "I didn't hear you," Amelia said. "I did not wish to be heard." He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. "Renaud told me he recommended those texts. I had hoped he would not." "Why?" "Because some histories are better left buried." Amelia set the book aside. "Was it true? Did you kill her?" Alaric's joy tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "Yes," he said finally. "Did you love her?" "Yes." The admission hung between them, stark and painful. "The court demanded her death," he continued, his voice distant, as if reciting facts rather than reliving memories. "They believed her mortality had attracted the Blight. I knew it was superstition, but the Blight was consuming everything. Thousands were dying. The court threatened rebellion if I did not act. So you chose the world over her. I chose duty over desire. His crimson eyes met hers. It is what kings do. And have you regretted it? For 300 years. A pause. Long and weighted. Every single day. Amelia felt something shift in her chest. Not pity, exactly. Understanding, perhaps. The recognition of a wound that never healed. Is that why you're so determined to save me? She asked quietly. Because you couldn't save her? Alaric looked away. Perhaps. Or perhaps I have simply learned that some sacrifices should never be asked of anyone, king or not. Before Amelia could respond, a bright laugh echoed from the floor below. They both looked down. The boy stood at the base of the spiral staircase, Lisette beside him, pointing up at the painted ceiling with delight. Look, he called up to Amelia. The stars are moving. Amelia smiled despite herself. They're beautiful, aren't they? The boy's gaze shifted to Alaric, and instead of fear, his expression filled with curiosity. Your coat is very long, the boy observed. Does it get in the way when you walk? Alaric blinked, clearly caught off guard. I have grown accustomed to it. Can I touch it? Lisette gasped. Henri, you mustn't. It's all right, Alaric said, descending the staircase with fluid grace. He knelt when he reached the boy, bringing himself to eye level. You may. The boy Henri, Amelia realized, finally learning his name, reached out and ran small fingers over the heavy wool of Alaric's coat. It's soft, Henri said. Like a blanket. It is very old, Alaric said. Older than you can imagine. Older than Amelia? Much older. Henri considered this seriously. Are you older than Amelia, too? Yes. Are you older than Lisette? Yes. Are you older than the trees? Alaric's lips twitched. Some of them. Henry's eyes widened. You must know everything. I know many things, Alaric said quietly. But not everything. Some things remain mysteries even to me. Like what? Alaric glanced up at Amelia, his expression unreadable. Like why some people are brave enough to face monsters, he said, when running would be easier. Henri followed his gaze and grinned. Amelia's not scared of anything. No, Alaric agreed softly. I do not believe she is. That night, unable to sleep, Amelia walked the corridors. Her leg was fully healed now, and she'd grown familiar with the layout of the palais, at least the sections she was permitted to access. The eastern wing remained locked. The lower levels were forbidden, but the main halls were hers to wander. She was passing the portrait gallery when she heard voices. Low. Urgent. Coming from behind a door left slightly ajar. She should have kept walking, but something in the tone made her stop. Cannot wait much longer, a woman's voice said. Serafina. The girl grows stronger. More confident. She is earning his protection through more than just necessity. What do you propose? A man's voice, older, rougher. We act during the solstice ball. Alaric will be occupied with the ritual preparations. Security will be divided. We take the girl, drain her, and use her blood to accelerate the blight, not stop it. Silence. You speak of genocide, another voice said, uncertain. I speak of purification, Serafina hissed. The mortal world is a cancer. The blight will cut it away, and we will rise from the ashes, pure and eternal. No more pretending to coexist. No more bowing to their fragility. And Alaric? Will be dealt with. He has grown weak. Sentimental. He is no longer fit to lead. Amelia's blood turned to ice. The girl dies at the ball, Serafina continued. Make your preparations. Inform only those we trust absolutely. This stays between us. Footsteps approached the door. Amelia ran. She fled through the corridors, her heart hammering, her mind racing. She should hide. She should find Henri. She should. No. If she ran, Serafina would know she'd overheard. If she took Henri and tried to escape, they'd be hunted down within hours. There was only one option. One person who could stop this. She found Alaric in his study, bent over a desk covered in maps and documents, his face illuminated by candlelight. He looked up when she burst through the door. Amelia, what? Serafina is planning to kill me, she said, breathless. At the solstice ball. She wants to use my blood to accelerate the blight, not stop it. She wants to wipe out the mortal world. Alaric went very still. You're certain? I heard her. Just now. She was meeting with others. She called you weak. Said you'd be dealt with. Alaric rose slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to something far colder. How many were with her? I don't know. At least 3 voices. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the dark grounds. I suspected Serafina harbored extremist views, he said quietly. But I did not believe she would act on them. Not openly. She's planning a coup, Amelia said. And I'm just the excuse. Alaric turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of 800 years in his eyes. Not anger. Sorrow. You could have run, he said. You could have taken Henri and tried to escape. Why did you come to me? Amelia met his gaze. Because running won't save the world. And despite everything, I think you actually want to. Something flickered in his expression. Gratitude, perhaps. Or recognition. Serafina must be stopped, he said. Before the ball. Before she can act. What will you do? Alaric's jaw set. What I should have done 3 centuries ago when the court demanded Marguerite's death. Which is, choose the world over duty to those who would destroy it. He moved to his desk and began writing rapidly on parchment. I am moaning the full court, he said. Tomorrow night, I will force Serafina's hand, make her reveal herself. And then I will end this. And if you're wrong? Amelia asked. If I misheard? Then I will apologize to the Baroness and tighten security regardless. He looked up. But you did not mishear. I have known Serafina for 400 years. She is brilliant, ambitious, and utterly without mercy. If she believes the blight serves her vision of purity, she will embrace it. He sealed the letter with wax and his signet ring. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't have a choice. You did. And you made the right one. He crossed her and, carefully, placed a hand on her shoulder. I will protect you, Amelia Hart. This I swear. Not because you're a key or a resource. Then why? His crimson eyes held hers. Because you deserve to be protected. And I have failed too many who did not. The ballroom of Le Palais de Newt had not been opened in decades. Amelia stood at its entrance, breath caught in her throat, as servants pulled back massive velvet drapes to reveal a space that seemed to defy the laws of architecture. The ceiling soared impossibly high, constructed entirely of glass panels held together by silver filigree that formed intricate patterns of stars and moons. Beyond the glass, the night sky hung heavy with winter clouds, threatening snow. Crystal chandeliers descended like frozen waterfalls, each one holding 100 candles that cast dancing shadows across marble floors so polished they reflected everything like black mirrors. The walls were paneled in dark wood carved with scenes of hunts and battles, and along the perimeter, tall windows looked out onto snow-covered gardens lit by torches that burned with blue-white flame. It was breathtaking. It was terrifying. The gown, Miss Hart, Marguerite said behind her. Amelia turned to face the dress laid out on a mannequin, and her stomach tightened. White. Pure, unrelenting white. The bodice was structured like armor, boned and reinforced, with a high collar that would force her chin up. The neckline was modest, almost severe, and the sleeves were long and fitted. But the skirt was a masterpiece of silk and tulle, layers upon layers that would make her look like she was floating. Like a bride. Or a sacrifice. I can't wear that, Amelia whispered. You must, Marguerite said, not unkindly. His Majesty has requested it. White represents your purity of bloodline. It is symbolic. It's a target. Marguerite's expression softened slightly. Yes, but you will not be alone. His Majesty will not leave your side. 2 hours later, Amelia stood before a mirror, barely recognizing herself. The gown fit perfectly, accentuating a figure she'd never paid much attention to. Her dark hair had been pulled back and pinned with tiny diamonds that caught the light. Her face was pale, her eyes too wide, her lips colorless despite the faint tint Marguerite had applied. She looked like a ghost. A beautiful, fragile ghost. "You are ready," Marguerite said. "I'm really not." Nevertheless, the knock came precisely at 8. Alaric stood in the doorway, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. He wore black. Severe, formal, immaculate. A long coat with silver buttons, tailored trousers, boots polished to a mirror shine. His pale hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, and his crimson eyes seemed to glow against the darkness of his clothing. He looked every inch a king, and every inch a predator. "You look," he began, then stopped. "The gown suits you." "It makes me feel like a lamb at market," Amelia said. His lips twitched. "Then I shall endeavor to be a vigilant shepherd." He offered his arm. She took it, her hand trembling slightly against the fine wool of his sleeve. They descended the grand staircase together. The court was already assembled in the ballroom, a sea of dark colors and jewel tones that parted as Alaric and Amelia entered. Every eye turned to them. The conversations died to whispers. Amelia forced herself to keep her chin up, her spine straight, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Alaric led her to the center of the room, where a dais had been erected. He turned to face the assembly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. "Members of the Court of Endless Night," he said, "we gather tonight to celebrate the winter solstice, as we have for centuries. But tonight is also significant for another reason." Silence. Absolute and expectant. "Tonight," Alaric continued, "we acknowledge the presence of Amelia Hart, whose bloodline will be the instrument of our salvation. The ritual to counter the blight will take place at the next full moon. Until then, she remains under my protection. Any threat to her is a threat to our survival. Any harm that befalls her will be met with my personal retribution." His crimson eyes swept the room, lingering on Serafina. "Is this understood?" A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the court. Serafina stepped forward, resplendent in black silk that seemed to absorb the light. She curtsied deeply. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice honeyed, "we are all grateful for your diligence in protecting such a precious resource. Though one must wonder, is such a public display of attachment entirely wise?" Attachment. Alaric's tone was ice. "Forgive me," Serafina said, her smile sharp. "Poor choice of words. I merely meant that elevating a mortal to such prominence may give the court mixed signals about your priorities." "My priority," Alaric said coldly, "is the survival of our people. If you question that, Baroness, you are welcome to challenge me directly." The room went deathly silent. Serafina's smile didn't waver. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I live only to serve." "Then serve by celebrating," Alaric said, turning away from her dismissively. "Music. Let the ball commence." An orchestra materialized from the shadows. Amelia hadn't even noticed them, and began to play. A waltz, slow and haunting, filled the ballroom. Alaric turned to Amelia and extended his hand. "I don't know how to dance," she whispered. "Not like this." "Follow my lead," he said. "I will not let you fall." She placed her hand in his, and he pulled her into the waltz. The world blurred around them. Alaric moved with effortless grace, guiding her through steps she didn't know, anticipating her missteps before she made them. The white gown swirled around her like smoke, and despite her fear, despite everything, she felt almost weightless. "You're doing well," Alaric murmured. "I'm terrified." "I know. So am I." She looked up at him, surprised. "You." "Serafina will move tonight," he said quietly, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. "I can feel it. She is too calm. Too confident. What do we do? We wait. And when she strikes, we end this." The music swelled. Around them, other couples joined the dance, a swirl of dark colors and pale faces. Amelia caught glimpses of Serafina through the crowd, watching them with cold amber eyes. The waltz ended. Alaric led Amelia to the edge of the ballroom, where servants offered crystal flutes of dark red liquid. "Don't drink it," Alaric said softly. "I wasn't planning to." He took a flute anyway, more for appearance than intention, and stood beside her as the next dance began. Henri appeared then, led by Lisette, dressed in a small formal suit that made him look impossibly young and serious. He ran to Amelia and hugged her waist. "You look like a princess," he said. "Odd." "You look very handsome," Amelia replied, kneeling to adjust his color. Alaric watched them, something unreadable crossing his face. "May I?" he asked quietly. Henri looked up at him. "May you what?" "Dance with you. It is traditional for young gentlemen to dance at court functions." Henry's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Alaric offered his hand, and Henri took it, grinning. They moved onto the floor, Alaric adjusting his steps to match the child's clumsy enthusiasm, and despite everything, Amelia felt her chest tighten with something warm. Then the lights went out. Every candle in every chandelier extinguished simultaneously, plunging the ballroom into darkness. Screams erupted. Glass shattered. Amelia felt hands grab her from behind, yanking her backward. "Alaric!" she screamed. "Amelia!" His voice was a roar that shook the very foundations of the palais. Light exploded through the ballroom, not candlelight, but crimson radiance that poured from Alaric himself, illuminating everything in blood-red brightness. He stood in the center of the floor, Henri shielded behind him, and his eyes blazed like molten suns. "Release her." The hands holding Amelia tightened. She struggled, driving her elbow backward into someone's ribs. A grunt of pain. The grip loosened. She spun and saw her attacker, a young vampire in court livery, his face twisted with fanaticism. "For the purity of our kind," he hissed, raising a silver dagger. The blade came down and stopped. Alaric's hand closed around the vampire's wrist, crushing it with an audible crack. The dagger clattered to the floor. "You," Alaric said, his voice devoid of all humanity, "have made a grave mistake." He released the vampire's broken wrist and placed one hand on the attacker's chest. The vampire's scream lasted only seconds before he disintegrated into black, oily ash that left a stain on the white marble. The blight's corruption. Proof. Alaric turned to the assembled court, his power radiating outward like heat from a forge. "Serafina," he called, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Show yourself, or I will tear this palace apart until I find you." For a moment, nothing. Then slow, mocking applause echoed from the upper gallery. Serafina stood there, flanked by 6 cloaked figures, her expression triumphant. "You have grown weak, old friend," she said. "Sentimental over a mortal girl. Protective of a human child. You are no longer fit to lead us into the New Age." "The New Age," Alaric said coldly, "built on genocide and fanaticism? I think not. The blight is our salvation." Serafina's voice rose, fervent. "It will cleanse the mortal rot and leave only the pure. And her blood," she pointed at Amelia, "will hasten it. Then you have declared yourself my enemy. I have declared myself your successor." The cloaked figures threw off their robes, revealing weapons, silver blades, crossbows, vials of something that glowed sickly green. The court scattered, and the winter solstice ball became a battlefield. The glass ceiling shattered, not from impact, but from the sheer force of Alaric's power as it exploded outward in a wave of crimson light that turned the ballroom into a storm of crystal rain and ancient fury. Amelia threw herself over Henri, shielding him as shards fell like deadly snow, each piece refracting the red glow into 1,000 blood-colored stars. The sound was deafening, glass breaking, with splintering, the roar of something primal and unstoppable. When she looked up, Alaric was no longer standing where he'd been. He was simply there, in front of Serafina, moving faster than Amelia's eyes could track. His hand closed around the Baroness's throat, lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. "You would do millions for your vision of purity," Alaric said, his voice resonant with 8 centuries of accumulated power. "You would use her blood to accelerate the blight. You would murder a child." Serafina clawed at his hand, her perfect face contorting. "You are a relic clinging to a dead world. And you," Alaric said quietly, "are a fanatic who mistakes cruelty for strength." He released her, and she dropped to the marble floor, gasping. But before she could rise, she pulled a silver dagger from her gown and lunged not at Alaric, but at Amelia. The Baroness moved with inhuman speed, crossing the ballroom in a blur of black silk and lethal intent. The dagger's tip gleamed, aimed directly at Amelia's heart. Amelia didn't think. She grabbed the heavy skirts of her white gown and swung, the weighted fabric laden with structure and boning striking Serafina across the face with surprising force. The Baroness stumbled, more from shock than injury, and in that split second of distraction, Amelia kicked out with her fully healed leg, connecting solidly with Serafina's knee. The Baroness went down. Alaric was there before she could rise, his boot pinning her wrist to the floor. The dagger skittered away across the marble. "Well fought," he said, glancing at Amelia with something that might have been pride. Then he looked down at Serafina, and all warmth vanished from his expression. "For 4 centuries, I tolerated your ambition, your disdain for mortals, your belief in supremacy. I allowed it because I believed in freedom of thought, even when I disagreed." His voice was cold as winter. "But you crossed from thought into action. You plotted murder. You embraced genocide. You corrupted members of my court." He knelt beside her, his crimson eyes boring into hers. "Tell me where the rest of your conspirators are hiding." Serafina smiled through the blood on her lips. "You think this ends with me? There are dozens who believe as I do. Hundreds. The old guard grows restless, Alaric. Your compassion is seen as weakness. Your protection of the mortal world as betrayal. Then I will root out every single one," Alaric said, "and offer them the same choice I offer you now. Bend the knee and renounce this madness, or face obliteration." "I will never." Alaric placed his hand over her heart. Serafina's words cut off with a strangled gasp. Black veins began to spread from where he touched her, crawling across her pale skin like corrupted roots. "The blight. You wanted to accelerate it," Alaric said softly. "Let me show you what that truly means." "Stop," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Alaric, stop." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "She tried to kill you," he said. "She would have used your blood to end the mortal world." "I know." Amelia stepped closer, Henri still clutching her hand. "But if you do this, if you use the blight as a weapon, you become what she accused you of being. You prove her right. She deserves to suffer for what she's done. Maybe, but you deserve better than to carry that weight." Amelia knelt beside him, meeting his ancient eyes with her mortal ones. "You've been alone for 800 years, making impossible choices, carrying burdens no one should bear. Don't let her turn you into something you'll regret for the next 800. Alaric's jaw clenched. The black veins stopped spreading, but didn't recede. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "What a king should do," Amelia said. "Show mercy where it's deserved, and justice where it's required. Strip her of her title. Exile her. But don't become the monster she believes you to be." For a long moment, Alaric simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he removed his hand from Serafina's chest. The black veins faded, leaving the Baroness gasping and trembling on the floor. "Baroness Serafina," Alaric said, his voice carrying absolute authority, "you are hereby stripped of your title, your holdings, and your place in this court. You will be escorted beyond our borders and forbidden from returning on pain of final death. Your co-conspirators will be given the same choice: renounce and live, or resist and face obliteration." He stood, towering over her broken form. "You called me weak for showing compassion. Perhaps you are right. But I would rather be a weak king who protects the innocent than a strong one who slaughters them. Seraphina's amber eyes burned with hatred, but she said nothing as 2 guards hauled her to her feet and dragged her from the ballroom. The remaining members of the court stood in stunned silence, many of them bleeding from cuts caused by the falling glass, all of them staring at their king with newfound fear and respect. Alaric turned to face them. "The blight is real," he said. "The corruption you saw on Seraphina's attacker is proof. It has already begun to infect our kind. Without Amelia Hart's blood, used correctly and willingly, we will all face the same fate. Slow decay, eternal suffering, and eventual extinction." He gestured to Amelia, still kneeling on the floor in her ruined white gown, Henri pressed against her side. "This woman is not a trinket, not a resource, not property." His voice softened. "She is the key to our survival, and she has shown more courage and mercy than most immortals I have known. You will treat her with the respect she deserves, or you will answer to me." Silence. Then, one by one, the members of the court knelt. Not to Alaric. To Amelia. She stared at them, overwhelmed, her hands trembling. Henri squeezed her fingers. "You're really a princess now," he whispered. Alaric crossed to them and extended his hand. Amelia took it, letting him help her to her feet. The white gown was torn and stained with blood, not hers, thankfully, and her hair had come loose from its pins, falling around her shoulders in dark waves. She looked like she'd been through a war. She felt like it too. "Come," Alaric said quietly. "Let me tend to your wounds." "I'm not hurt." "You're shaking." "That's just adrenaline." Nevertheless, he led her and Henri from the ballroom, past the kneeling court, through corridors littered with broken glass that crunched beneath their feet. They walked in silence until they reached Alaric's private study, a room Amelia had never been permitted to enter. He settled her into a chair by the fire and wrapped a heavy blanket around her shoulders. Henri curled up beside her, already half asleep from exhaustion. Alaric poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and offered her one. "What is it?" she asked. "Brandy. Very old. Very expensive. And entirely mortal." She took a sip. It burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from the inside out. Alaric sat across from her, his crimson eyes reflecting the firelight. "You saved my life tonight," Amelia said quietly. "You saved mine first," he replied. "When you warned me of Seraphina's plot. When you chose to trust me instead of run. And you listened when I asked you to show mercy." "I have not shown mercy in a very long time," Alaric admitted. "I had forgotten what it felt like." "How does it feel?" He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Lighter," he said finally. "As if I have set down a burden I did not know I was carrying." Amelia smiled despite everything. "Good. You were carrying too many already." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, Henry's soft breathing the only other sound. "The ritual," Alaric said eventually. "It will take place at the next full moon as planned. 1 vial of blood, drawn during the lunar zenith. Dr. Renaud has prepared everything. You will feel no pain, and afterward, you will be free to leave if you wish." "And if I don't wish?" Alaric looked at her sharply. "You would stay." "I don't know," Amelia said honestly. "A week ago, this place was a prison. Tonight, it became something else. I'm not sure what yet. But Henri is happy here. Safe. And you," she hesitated. "You're not the monster I thought you were." "What am I then?" "Tired. Lonely. Trying very hard to do the right thing even when the right thing costs you everything." She met his gaze. "I understand that more than you know." Something shifted in Alaric's expression. Warmth. Recognition. Perhaps even hope. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when the blight is stopped and the world is safe, I will uphold my vow. You and Henri will be free to go, with enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of your days. But if you choose to stay," he paused, "I would be honored by your continued presence. As your ward. As my guest. My friend, perhaps." If such a thing is possible between our kinds. Amelia thought of the alley, the rain, the terror, and then she thought of the gardens. Henry's laughter. Alaric kneeling before a child to ask permission to dance. I think, she said slowly, it might be. Alaric smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. Outside, snow began to fall through the shattered glass ceiling of the ballroom, covering the bloodstains and broken crystal in a blanket of pure white. A new beginning. Or perhaps simply a pause in an ancient story, waiting to see what came next.